Welcome to the UIAAA Connection podcast. Hometown Ticketing is proud to be the exclusive sponsor of the UIAAA Connection podcast and to provide schools nationwide with the best options for digital ticketing for their events. Visit their website at hometownticketing.com to learn how they can make digital ticketing possible and simple at your school. Thank you to Hometown Ticketing for their exclusive sponsorship of the UIAAA Connection podcast.
Welcome back to another edition of the UIAAA Connection. I'm your host, Mark Hutch-Hunter. Today we have as our special guest, Rhett Jackson, Director of Athletics at Gunnison Valley High School in Utah. Welcome to the podcast, Rhett.
Thank you, Hutch. Appreciate you having me on.
Let's have you begin by sharing with our audience here in Utah and across the country where you grew up, where you went to college, your first job, all of that type of thing.
So I grew up in southern Utah, a community known as Kanab, Utah, down on the Arizona border. I am the fifth of six boys. My family ran a ranch there, as well as my dad and mom both were educators. And so I grew up farming, ranching, playing sports. Like I say, I had five brothers. So it was a great place to grow up down in Kanab, Utah.
And you're one of the famous Jacksons that all went through Kanab High School.
There was six boys, and we all, I guess, left a mark. The community survived, however.
I like it. And so after high school, where did you go to college?
Yeah, so I served an LDS mission to Dallas, Texas, and then when I got home, I went to 2 years at Utah Valley University. At the time I went there, it was Utah Valley State College. Did 2 years there, got my general education requirements finished. Then I went to Southern Utah University. At the time, it was a kind of a hotbed for people who were interested in getting into coaching. It was called the Coaching Factory under Dr. Steve Lunt.
Absolutely.
And Dr. Lunt had been a high school coach at Kanab High School. And so he and my parents knew each other quite well. And so that was just seemed like a natural fit to go to Southern Utah University. And I graduated with a bachelor's degree in social science and then a minor in coaching under Dr. Steve Lunt.
And I can't even count the amount of people that have been on this podcast that have talked about the Coaching Factory and Dr. Lunt and the effect that it's had. So thanks for mentioning that. Let's talk about in Kanab, as you grew up, a lot different than, let's say, an urban area here in Salt Lake County with the youth sports. I mean, I can't imagine that they had Little League football, or maybe you did, and I don't know who you'd play, because that'd be quite a trip just to get to another town that had one.
Yeah, so we when we were in elementary school, we had some flag football, but because just the amount of kids, it was 6th, 7th, and 8th, and then we would just get into flag football teams. But and then some local businesses would sponsor Little League basketball, but that was that in the wintertime, and then you had local businesses that would help sponsor Little League baseball. So you really didn't start playing contact football until high school, but between the local businesses really pitching in and sponsoring teams, we were able to have fairly competitive, local basketball games and baseball, and with other close communities, there in Fredonia, Arizona, and communities just north of Kanab. So that would be about the size of it, not like say, urban kids would have access to.
That's interesting. You mentioned Kanab, and it just brings back my boyhood memories. You'll appreciate this because I can remember Kanab, and I really remember only two hotels in Kanab. We would go to the Grand Canyon every year with my parents, and we would stay at Aiken's Lodge there on the main street. And then we would always eat breakfast at Houston's Trails End. And then we would always drive by the Perry Hotel.
Yeah.
And I asked my father, how come we couldn't stay there? And I guess the Perry Motel at that time, that's where all the movie stars and everyone stayed. But of course, now Kanab's got, I want to say, dozens.
Yes, lots of, but I'm happy to report that Perry's Lodge, Aiken's Lodge, and the Houston's Trails End, those local businesses are still in business and thriving. A cool story that I think our listeners would be interested in would have been about 64, 65. As my dad used to tell the story, is Kanab high school, their budgets were kind of lean. There were some tough years there, and the local people really they treated the movie stars with deference and respect. They weren't always up in their grill wanting autographs, and just gave them their space. And so a lot of times these movie stars enjoyed coming to Kanab because they the locals just weren't fawning all over them, and they were just down to earth. And Frank Sinatra and the Rat Pack had come in. I believe it was Sergeant's 3. And Frank Sinatra and Sammy Davis Jr. and I think Peter Lawford. Anyway, they'd come in and did Sergeant's 3. And Sinatra was so impressed and appreciative of how the community had supported him. He'd heard through the grapevine from some locals that had gone into to Perry's to have breakfast. He heard over, through the grapevine that the Kanab High School, their football program was in need of some help, some financial help. To get new uniforms. And Sinatra would fly in. He would only come and do his filming, then he'd fly in on a helicopter back to Vegas on the weekends. So one weekend while they were filming Sergeant's 3, unbeknownst to the locals, Frank Sinatra basically came in, and I guess when he went back to Vegas, went to a sporting goods store and bought like 35, 40 brand new helmets, football uniforms, and then had them shipped by truck to Kanab, Utah for the Kanab Cowboys to have a new fresh set of uniforms. So that's a kind of a cool story where being known as Little Hollywood paid off. And Frank Sinatra, all the locals, he's legendary. He was a good dude.
That's fascinating, because I had heard, what's the proper way to say it? I had heard that something like this had happened, that somebody had bought some stuff for the high school back in the late 60s, early 70s. I've heard like 5 or 6 different movie stars, John Wayne, but so now you're telling me that Frank did it. So that's kind of great to get this straight and put that up there. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, that's a cool story.
Let's have you share who your mentors were growing up and even today that affected you. I know you mentioned one, Dr. Lunt, but there's certainly others in your life that had an effect on you.
Well, when I saw the questions ahead of time, I was really excited that you asked that question. I had some great mentors growing up. Of course, my father was a great dad. He was on Kanab High School's first football team in 1944, and so football has kind of ran in our family since my dad was in high school. But he's part of the greatest generation. Hutch, he's 95 years old, still very, very much with it. Really, likes to follow I have a senior in high school, and he's constantly wanting to know how our football games go here at Gunnison. See how my son's nickname is Skip. He's always wanting to know how Skip did. But he had been in the Navy during World War II. So he was one of those that was no nonsense, but completely supportive, taught me and my brothers the ethic of hard work. If you do the job, you need to do it right. And anyway, he was a great mentor. Professionally, Dr. Lunt, like you mentioned, but when I got the chance to come back out of college, I went and did my student teaching with my old high school coach, and then had the opportunity to be an assistant for him for 2 years. A gentleman I think is one of the best high school football coaches that Utah's produced. His name was Arlen Hafen. And
I'm familiar with the name, obviously.
So Coach Hafen was a fantastic mentor to me. I learned, I enjoyed playing for him as a kid, but I absolutely loved coaching with him as an assistant coach. He was a type that once you were on his staff, he trusted you. He gave you latitude to be creative, to be able to feel like you could freely speak in a coach's meeting and that you were listened to. And the 2 years that I spent with Coach Hafen before I became a head coach, they were invaluable. So Coach Arlen Hafen on the football side of things was a great mentor to me, and as well, he was my mentor teacher as I began the process of becoming an educator. When I came to Gunnison, I feel the timing for me when I came to Gunnison, looking back now after all of these years, what a blessing it was to be able to be just across the hall from another legendary coach, this time in basketball, by the name of Danny Hill.
Mm.
And Coach Hill was a fantastic mentor to me. Here again, I came to Gunnison as the head football coach and the head girls basketball coach. But Coach Hill was always there to, you could pick his brain, you could borrow inbounds plays. I mean, he was just a great mentor that way, and a fantastic human being. So being able to, I eventually then became an assistant coach for him for several years as his in the twilight of his career. And I look back fondly on being able to say I was an assistant coach for Coach Arlen Hafen and Coach Danny Hill. So those three, my brother Brennan is just older than me, and he is an associate director with our state activity association.
Another one of the famous Jacksons.
Yeah,
Yes.
and my brother Brennan is, he's always looked out for me, shall I say? He's been his brother's keeper. We were coaching at the same time. We're still, I think, the only brothers in Utah football history to actually be brothers and coach against each other, and so at rival schools. So anyway, our paths have crossed, and he's always been a great resource, someone that you can trust completely, who understood all the nuances of being a head coach and working with parents and working with players, strategies. So over the course of my career, I feel like I've had some great mentors.
Let's talk about that. Let's delve into that a little bit more. So what is it like, two head coaches coaching against each other? I know you may not be as famous as the Harbaughs, but in Utah, you certainly are, because the Jackson name is famous. So I know it wasn't on the questions I sent you, but talk a little bit about that.
So, we always approached it as we're brothers first. We knew that we had jobs to do, and that we had student athletes to take care of, and there was no question that we were going to prepare for each other and get after each other. But in the end of the day, it wasn't about us. We want to make it about the schools that we're working at, and the young men that were playing for us. And for those 4 quarters, we would definitely get after each other. But afterwards, it was always a hug. A funny story. One year, towards the end of his career, before he got out of coaching and went into school administration, it was the night before the game, and anyway, I went to closed up shop, got ready for bed, and I came out the morning of the game, and somebody had come and taken the back tires off of my car and then jacked it up and put it on blocks. And come to find out, it was my brother and his assistant coaches from Manti High School that had come down to Gunnison and decided to give the head coach for the Bulldogs a little bit more to think about on game day. But it was really fun. And I know that he and I have a record that will never be broken, because there will be another set of brothers that will come along and coach against each other. But one unique thing is, the very first game that we coached against each other, I was actually living with him. So
wow,
we had to share, back in the day, one TV and one VHS player. And so it was the second game of the season. So we had to come up with, okay, you get your TV. Of course, I'm at a disadvantage here because it's his TV, his VHS player, right? So he got first dibs, and then I did game prep, but we'd negotiated what times who could use the TV in the VCR. But another fun piece of trivia.
That's fascinating. Rhett, share with us what's your biggest failure or disappointment in life, and what you learned from it.
I want you to know I laid awake at night last night, mulling that one over. But I came to, and hopefully I can frame this, because I think it will resonate with a lot of fellow athletic administrators and coaches. I look back over the course of my career, and I think there there's a time that if you want to call it a failure, but I wish I'd have been better at acknowledging and appreciating players who didn't complain and just showed up to practice on time and did their jobs. And you never really had to worry about them, but because they weren't the squeaky wheel, sometimes you didn't give them the oil that they deserved. Assistant coaches that were always there on time, that you knew would handle their business. You didn't need to, mollycoddle them at all. They just went about their work in a quiet, systematic, and functioning way. And as a coach, sometimes I look back, I should have been more appreciative for those players and those coaches that went about their business that way. I spent 7 years in school administration, and I think there are a lot of teachers that just in faculty meeting, they nod their head, their competence is unquestioned, and they go about their daily activities. They take care of their kids in their classrooms, and sometimes as administrators, they turn into flyover country. And now that I'm back in athletic administration, I've really tried to rectify that and really show coaches, especially now that we rely on them to be self-motivated and self-starters, to make sure their registrations are in on time, to make sure they're getting their certifications done on time, and that the coaches that handle their budgets appropriately, that basically make it so that it's really easy for you as an athletic administrator to support them and just be there as a mentor and a guide, rather than you having to jump in to cover shortcomings. So if there's, failure is a kind of a strong word, but over the course of my career, I feel like that's something that maybe I could have done better at, and I should have been better at. And I'm trying to be more cognizant of that now as an athletic administrator, especially with the responsibilities and the requirements that coaches have nowadays that those of us who came before them didn't and don't have.
Sure. Some great insight. Thanks for sharing that. Let me ask you a question that's not on the list I sent you. A thought just came to me. I have a cousin whose name is Rhett Ashton. And I think there was a time when and I only found this out a few years ago, that he was the softball coach at Gunnison Valley. Is that correct?
Yeah, he was for when his kids came through. He had a daughter that was a really good softball player, and Brett married a Gunnison Valley gal, and they started their family up in Springfield, but then moved into the Gunnison Valley, where they raised their family and had the privilege of coaching all of these boys in football. And so Brett still lives here. He's a good friend of mine. He just same neighborhood.
Well, that's great. So when you see him, tell him I say hi, because I probably haven't seen Brett for probably since his mother died. And that's
absolutely. I'll let him know. Yep.
That's been a while. That's great. Let's talk for a moment about the job of today's athletic administrator and how it's different than when you first got in the profession.
So when I got out of coaching in 2020, let's see, the fall of 2009. So 2009, 2010, became the athletic director in the fall of 2010. There was no coaching certifications. There was no, the register my athlete didn't exist, and register my coach. And so the paperwork was just that, paperwork. And as the athletic director,
higher and higher.
Yep. And we were filling filing cabinets full of paper, but your role basically was still as a support. You were interacting with coaches, trying to be a mentor, answer any questions that concerns that they have. If they needed a place to voice concerns or frustrations, you wanted to be there for them. But then it came down to just the nuts and bolts of making sure officials were scheduled, make sure busing was scheduled and on time. It wasn't quite as demanding as it is now. And let's be honest, even the last 10 years of time, with technology and social media and just the ability for people to voice their opinions so much easier now, and because opinions are always close to the surface, we have to be very careful with how we deal with media. We have to always focus on putting a good face and a good foot forward for your school and your programs. Now you got to make sure that your all of your coaches are not only head coaches but assistant coaches are certified and trained. The good news is, Hutch, as I think this process has, I don't know, forced is the right word, but it has motivated coaches to take these certifications, to take these classes, and to become better. And I believe that the coaches in the state of Utah, and I know here in our own building, we are getting better. This extra training and this extra attention that comes through coaching certifications, I think we're going to see and look back at this 5-10 years from now, that this is a good thing, even though it is a lot of tediousness and you're in a school our size, being rural, we're relying on a lot of people who don't work in our building to coach all of our programs. And so that adds an extra challenge. I think maybe at most urban schools, they probably are able to fill those coaching vacancies with more faculty people. We're easy 50-50 faculty and community. So as an athletic director, you're constantly having to reach out into your community. You're having to be a good support to those people, helping them. And if that means you get a 10 o'clock at night phone call and you're tired, you just got home from a volleyball match, and an assistant swimming coach that's in your community has a question about, NFHS Learn or Register My Coach, you take that phone call and
Sure.
you really try to be helpful. So the job is almost 24/7 now, and especially trying to help your coaches navigate what the responsibilities that they have now.
Thank you. Let's have you talk, Rhett, for a moment about your time serving on the UIAAA Athletic Director Executive Committee and how you got involved with that. How obviously we'd like to get all of our ADs at one time or another to serve on that, but talk about your time on that.
So this is my second stint on ADEC, and my first opportunity came. The region that we were in at the time was Region 17. They asked me to do it, and so it was right off the bat. I was a young AD coming just out of coaching, and so I thought, well, I'm one of these that I'm all in. So let's jump in with both feet. So I was kind of green when it came to the athletic director side of things, but that first I did it for several years, and it was one of the best decisions I ever made, because one thing you learn quickly, and sometimes coming from a rural situation, is athletic directors aren't their jobs in themselves. They're not cookie cutter. And I learned really fast that sitting there with seasoned athletic directors, that I needed to dive in and I needed to learn, I needed to pay attention, but I always felt supported, and that you could ask questions and that you could pick each other's brains. And many of the colleagues that I'd gone to school with at university, and former coaches that you cross paths with, were now in the athletic administration side of things. And I always felt that the athletic administration side of things, the people there, highly competent, because they've been in the trenches, and they just understand. It's not theoretical to them. As educators, sometimes we're constantly getting taught the newest, coolest thing on how to do instruction, or hey, we need to use this more social model when we work with students. There's always this theory that's trying. A lot of times it seeps into the classroom and into instruction. Well, when it comes to running an athletic department, that's real life, and those are real issues, and it's not necessarily theoretically. And so I think that the UIAAA is full of some of the most competent educators in our state and in our nation. And I'm now on my second stint with the ADEC, and I'll stay as long as they'll let me. I thoroughly enjoy meeting with the other athletic directors, meeting with the state representatives, and then being able to carry that information back to the athletic directors and administrators in my region, which is Region 16 now. And I think that as far as preparing and training, we take care of each other. And that's another thing that I've really enjoyed about sometimes in education, we have a tendency, and you know this probably as well as anybody, educators can sometimes want to create their own island and just kind of want to do their own thing. And because many of them are content specialists, they know their content better than anybody else, and so they kind of get a little turfy. I think athletic administrators are, my experiences, we're just the opposite. It's, we give each other a hug, a pat on the back. Hey, how can I help you? There is a really sense of esprit de corps, camaraderie, teamwork. And I think our association does a fantastic job, from the ADDIC members, and then going out to the region boards, to our scholarship programs, our April conference, where we're bringing people from all over the country, the trainings that we train each other, and we do a great job of it. So I'm thrilled that the ADDIC has been a great experience for me.
Well, thank you. Let's continue on that line of question and talk now with your UIAAA experience. You're involved now, you're a member, and share a few more stories about the benefit that has been to you, so we can get all of our athletic directors as members of the association.
Well, I think the main benefit for me is that I know when I go to an ADDIC meeting, or when I go to our year-end conference, that there are going to be people that get what I'm dealing with. I'm going to get empathy. But I'm also going to get competence, and people that are going to be there to say, yeah, I understand. This is kind of what we're dealing with. And then we can network, and we can bounce ideas off each other. And I think that, it's part of our culture. Anyway, here in Utah, we really look out for each other. And I've never felt like there was ever a door closed, that if I had a concern that I felt reticence to go and talk to somebody. And so when I came back the second time, I had never dealt with register my athlete. I'd been coming off of school administration, where that was just something that the athletic directors did, and now I'm the athletic director. And let me tell you, I was making some phone calls in a quick hurry to people that I had met, that I knew, and Richard Barton and I went to school together. We were close friends at SUU, and he was just down the road in Ridgefield, so I kept his telephone hot. There's just and he was always very gracious. But my thought is that as an association, that we continue to work towards encouraging people to get to know the benefit of being a part of our programs, our trainings. I've drive 2 hours up to Salt Lake to come to the trainings, and I never felt like, man, that was a waste of time. I've never felt that way. I thought, man, the trainings are outstanding. The other athletic administrators that are giving you the instruction, you can trust what they're saying. Because they're walking in the same shoes you are. And I just think the instruction that we give, and the training we give, is outstanding. And we're blessed because we don't have to bring in the quote unquote third party specialists. We have a deep bench in our state, in our association. You could call on many qualified athletic administrators to come and do the training for each other.
Well said. Thanks for sharing that. What's one common myth about being an athletic administrator that you would like to debunk?
Well, that we don't know what we're talking about. How's that? I mean,
yeah,
I think when it comes to, well, can I do two? Here's the other one.
Absolutely. Go ahead.
People don't realize, and I just want to, theoretically give everybody a pat on the back. We are in charge, right? And people don't realize this, but we're in charge of more people than most principals are of faculty. I have between, for a small rural school, we offer everything but lacrosse. So every other program other than lacrosse, and we have unified sports, we have esports. So I mean, we just don't say no. And so when you're talking about every head coach, every assistant coach, every team manager, you are talking about numbers that are far greater, at least in our school, than faculty. And so, and I know a lot of school administrators, athletic administrators, are tasked with transportation, working with bus drivers to make sure that the transportation for your teams is scheduled. So we have to do a lot of things. We have to be light on our feet. We have to be quick thinking. And we have to manage large groups of people. And I think that that's a myth, or that's just a point that people sometimes gloss over. You're not just there, doing crowd control at a ball game. You're there taking notes, trying to help, be there for coaches, alleviate concerns. You're trying to help, evaluate them if they have questions on their performance. So you can have year-end meetings with them. And when you think about that across the board with how many programs that we have in our school of 360 students, I have to work with a lot of people, and some of them are educators. But like I mentioned earlier, half of our coaches, the only tie they have to our school is they love the sport that they're helping coach. And so it is diverse, much more than, say, principals or even assistant principals. Athletic administrators today, you have to be on your game, and you have to be willing to meet people wherever they're at, because some of them our swim coach manages our grocery store. All right. So this is, that's as close to his experience with our school as me as the athletic director helping him get our swimming program off and running. Other than that, you could ask him, hey, how did the tomatoes look today in the grocery section? But, that would be his area of specialty. But we have to be, especially rural athletic administrators, we have to be able to meet a wide variety of people and bring them under the fold to run a good athletic department.
Very well said. Thanks for sharing that. What's the favorite part of your job, Rhett?
Oh, the games. I love working with coaches. One of the blessings of being at Gunnison Valley High School for a long time, many of our coaches are young men and women that I coached. And whether it was girls basketball or in football or boys basketball. So the relationships. And so being able to work with a lot of young educators that you've had, and now your peers, that's a great experience. But nothing beats a great ball game. And just being there and supporting our student athletes. And, now more so than ever, kids need these activities, and they're going to be learning lessons that will, serve them every bit as much as what they're learning in their classrooms. And so the ball games, competitions, there's nothing like a game night.
Rhett, share with our audience your 2 suggestions for a brand new athletic administrator that they would need to follow in order for them to be successful.
Well, number one is don't think you know it all. All right, humility, and know that there are places for you to go and get help. Rely on veteran athletic administrators. I learned that firsthand, both my first time as an AD and then coming back into the ranks. Reach out, allow these veteran athletic administrators to be your support. They are happy to do it. So that would be one suggestion that I would definitely stress. And the other thing is really foster relationships with your coaches. If you're a rural athletic administrator at a small rural high school, there's a strong possibility that you're going to be working with coaches who really have no connection to this school, and you're going to have to foster relationships that are based on trust and competency. So, as for your own personal growth, take advantage of any training. And I think we as an association, we do a fantastic job of training ourselves and relying on veteran athletic administrators and athletic directors. So, and then fostering relationships with your coaches so that they know that they can come to you with their issues, and those types of things that, some especially young coaches could struggle with. So rely on each other, reach out, and then get to know your coaches.
Well said. Thanks very much. Rhett, what questions should I have asked you that I failed to ask you?
I think we've had a wide-ranging discussion. I mean, you could have asked a little bit more about Kanab. That's kind of a unique place.
Yeah.
But no, there again, I felt like, as I look back over my career, like a lot of people, weren't sure that education and was going to be their career that they ended up in. I was always weighing whether to go to law school. I had two uncles that were lawyers, and the kind of, I think it runs in the blood. But as I was visiting, trying to decide, my coach, I mentioned him earlier, Coach Arlen Hafen, just says, why don't you come over? Your degree, it was wise counsel. He says, your degree will work whether you go into education or whether you decide to apply for law school. But hey, come over and let me be your mentor. It was his invitation that really, I thought, what am I at? I'll graduate 10 weeks in Kanab. I'll go. I've got a mentor teacher that's in my corner. So I says, Coach, I'd be happy to do it. So that's how I ended up coaching and teaching. And basically it was his invitation and offering to be my mentor. And it took one football game, Hutch, as I stepped off that bus wearing the red and white and going was against the North Severe Wolves in Salina, Utah. Mm-hmm. And I was hooked. Law school just left. And that was never ever in a question anymore. So I've always been grateful to Coach Hafen, hey, come give it a try, and basically is one that persuaded me to come and do it. And once I started, and then being around young people, not only just student athletes, but in the classroom, they're our greatest resource. I feel like they've kept me young, and they energize me to this day. I'm starting my 31st year in education, and I still enjoy my 2 world history classes that I teach. So I'm grateful for good mentors, and that kind of steered me down this path. And it's been a great, fulfilling career. But I just feel like I'm where I'm supposed to be now as an athletic administrator. I feel like I've been fully embraced and supported by the UIAAA, and I've known you for now 12 years, and I just appreciate all that you do for our association.
Well, thank you. That wraps it up for this edition of the UIAAA Connection. Once again, our guest has been Rhett Jackson, Director of Athletics at Gunnison Valley High School. Thanks so much, Rhett, for being on the show today.
Thank you, Hutch.
For our listeners, we hope you tune in again next week for another edition of the UIAAA Connection.